Good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome back to my channel, JPM.Cuisine. Today for you, we're doing our 4-month review. Well, it's been more than 4 months of the Mercer Millennia. And this is the color series handle 8-inch chef's knife. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. The first thing I wanted to say about this knife is that I really enjoy using the handle, even though it's a plastic style or a poly style handle with the rubber grips. It feels really good. The texture is nice. You get a good lockup. It's very comfortable in a pinch grip, and you have sort of that full bolster-esque little curvature here that really provides that same level of comfort that you would get from a bolster without interfering with the knife and allowing you to get a full sharpen from the end to the tip. That being said, it is a 3CR or an X30 CR13, so it's the German version of the 3CR13 steel. It isn't the 50, so I guess that makes it a little bit softer. In this case, the edge is held up pretty well. As you can probably see, there is a little bit of bending, and that's sort of what you get with a knife like this, is that you get a little bit of bending in the steel, not this knife necessarily, when you're using it for certain tasks. And in this case, the task was breaking down some chicken wings. So cutting through bone, cleaning up sort of the end or the nubs of the chicken legs and chicken wings with this. And a funny story, when I was using my knives to go through and sort of part out a chicken, I was doing some lollipop chicken, I was reaching for my VG10 knives, and it dawned on me that that might not be the knife to use because of all the reports and the stories of people chipping their knives using VG10 on bone and such. So I reached for this knife. Now, granted, we do have a little bit of bending there. It doesn't really impact the cutting, as you'll see in a little bit, but you know, that is something that's going to have to be worked out if you're going to try to get it straight again. It's not a major issue. It's definitely not a chip, so you're not going to have to do that much of a reprofile, but it is a little bit of a hindrance. Now this knife, oh, still sharp. I have not used it on a sharpening, a whetstone. I have used a sharpening steel with this knife. So a honing rod has been the only treatment that I've applied to this knife. I have not sharpened it on a whetstone at all. So it has maintained its edge in that course. And we'll see today whenever I do some testing. So let's go ahead and just get a weight again. I'm sure you can go through my first video where I unbox it and get the weight, but just to see if there's any sort of change. We're looking at 172 grams on this knife. One of the main questions or concerns when you're working with a knife with a plastic handle is, you know, the tang. Is it a full tang? And I'm not going to tear this one apart to double check or verify. But your fear is that when you're using the handle, if you're pushing down on something that requires a lot of force, usually the handle is the weakest part, so it may snap. Especially if it's sort of a rat tail or a pin style tang, and not necessarily a full tang. I mean, it can still happen with a full tang if it's rusted or defective, but in this case, that's your one fear whenever you're using a knife like this, is the handle. Now, that's not to say that that won't happen on any knife with any style. It's just with this knife, you can't really see the tang, so you have that sort of isn't not necessarily a fear, but you have that concern. Okay, so let's get into it. I don't know, let's see, let's look at the knife itself. A little bit of scratching, wear and tear. Again, these knives, when I picked it up, it was under $15. And it was a great buy then, and even now it'd still be a great buy. I mean, if you use these every 3 months and just toss them and replace them, that's not a big deal at all, especially for the price point. Given, you know, that it has a little bit of a dent from using it on bones. I mean, I'm still gonna just sharpen it and use it as normal, but if I wanted to purchase another one to have on backup, I could easily do that, as opposed to some of the knives that are like $100 $100 or more. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into some cutting with this one. So it's the first thing I'm going to note whenever I'm using this knife is when you're using a honing rod, and it could definitely use a honing rod again, there is some burrs that have occurred on this side of an edge from here to from the tip down to about, there we go, about halfway through. No burring on this side, so yeah, no burrs here. But you can definitely feel the burrs at the tips, so it's going to be a little bit of a rough cut there. But on the heel, it should be okay. And I believe when I first used this knife, I had a little bit of challenge cutting through a tomato. And as you can tell here, very ripe summer tomatoes this time of year. Not the same tomatoes that we were dealing with around Christmas time. And let's see, I can go a little bit thinner on that one. Just pinching it. Yeah, oh, a little bit of mush. And that's where it starts to get a little gritty with those burrs. But I mean, we get some nice cuts on it still. You can see through. It's not bad at all. Cutting through, yeah, it's definitely rougher there. No big deal. You can fix that with a honing rod or with a sharpening stone, a whetstone. You can take care of that, and that's not a big deal at all. Let's look at where we have sort of that bend. Guys, it still feels really good. Very little pressure. I'm just holding the knife, you know, just sort of one finger. This one's just resting on these grooves or these little raised bumps here, and just pushing through. Again, I am sitting down, so don't expect don't expect any major level of precision in me doing these cuts, but you know, just using it, you can feel that it's rough. It still cuts, and I've had this knife and I've used it quite a lot over this amount of time. I think they just posted a post about either BuzzFeed or Tasty or somebody talking about this knife as a big purchase. And this right here, again, you know, it may be hit or miss because of the packaging, but the quality of this knife that I received has always been very good. And that's sort of one of the reasons why this is an easy knife to use and not worry about replacing, because it's very inexpensive. And the quality of the blade that you're getting, I mean, you can buy one that costs a little bit more, but if it's not by a trusted manufacturer like Mercer, you never know what you're gonna get. And that's one of the things about buying from a trusted manufacturer, is that there's typically customer service or maybe even a warranty associated with these types of purchases that would allow you to at least get a peace of mind from there, versus buying from some brand that is either a new up-and-comer or one that you haven't really heard of before. So in that case, you know, it still cuts, demonstrated that. Let's go ahead and move these tomatoes over here. I just dumped them. All right. I usually oil my board before every time I shoot. And I may shoot like 3 or 4 videos at a time, but prior to shooting, I'll usually oil it, and then I'll remove the oil so that you don't see any kind of beading or any kind of grease stains on the knife as I'm working with it. So it may look like sometimes my board isn't oiled, but I always condition and oil it pretty regularly. So no need for concern there. If you haven't, check out my video where actually I talk about board maintenance, because that's an interesting one. All right, so let's go ahead and cut this potato here. Again, I'm using the tip, and even though it's got burrs, it still cuts, right? Even a dull knife can typically cut without any issues, right? Let's see, what do I want to do? I'll just cut this in half. Okay. Square it off. Not very good, but I'll just square it off. Attempt to. Okay. And we're not having any issues with this knife at all. You know what I'm saying? for me it still works. Let's do what do you expect? I mean, it's a knife, it's gonna cut, it hasn't rusted. We've got normal wear and tear marks on it. The blade is still straight enough to cut. It doesn't have any major performance issues in that sense. And honestly, I would rather damage a knife like this doing tasks like chopping through bones or whatever, things that you're not supposed to, because I can easily replace this knife. You know, that's probably the point I'm gonna hit on the most today, is the fact that you can easily replace this knife, assuming it's in stock, right? But this, honestly, you could use this knife. I don't know of any situation, you know, other than, and you get a nice flashy handle too, right? I don't know of any situation that would cause me to say that this isn't a knife that I would want to use. I mean, the only concern I would ever have is if I break the handle, but I mean, I could break the handle on any knife with a task like that. Given this knife, I don't have that concern so much, because I've been using it and I have been cutting through bone with it, and there's been no chipping. So that's one thing that you want to recognize on a softer blade knife. While there may be some bending, you won't typically have chipping, and in that case, for me, that makes it a solid buy. So that's been the 4-month review on the Mercer Millennia. This is the yellow handle, but it is the color series handle. They have black, they have white, and they have a whole bunch of other colors that you can pick out. I'll leave the link in the description below. And as always, thank you guys for watching.